Get the Angel Reese special at McDonald's now. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. Sound good? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
Would you wear the same shoes for every occasion? Or rock the same outfit 7 days a week? Of course not. Your style is better with options. Your investments could be too. SIBO Index options give you access to various contract sizes, global trading hours, and potential tax advantages. That's a good look for any portfolio. If you're ready to invest in style, head to betterwithoptions.com. There are risks associated with SIBO company products. Review the disclosures and disclaimers at sibo.com/US_disclaimers.
Hello, my name is May, and a few months ago, my parents were the victims of a scam, and thankfully at that time, they did not lose any money, but were really scared about what could happen in the future. So my question is, how do I help prevent my parents from getting scammed? If you have any ideas about how to help my aging parents, maybe alter their online behavior, or how to handle a phone call that comes into them, that would really be appreciated.
This is How To. I'm Courtney Martin. I gotta tell you, when I heard that message that May left on the How To listener line, I had a pit in my stomach thinking about my own aging parents. Older adults aren't the only victims of cybercrimes, of course. Scammers target literally everyone and ruin all kinds of lives. And they are getting more and more sophisticated. So, despite sounding a bit hyperbolic here, I gotta tell you, this deserves our vigilance. The next 30 minutes or so could literally save you thousands of dollars and a lot of heartbreak. And look, it's about more than money. Our elders can be robbed of things that are really important at a moment when ideally they would feel safe and taken care of. Their retirement savings, sure, but also their trust in others. And because of the shame that comes with being a victim of this kind of crime, they can also lose their dignity. In a moment, we'll get a big picture view from AARP, the go-to advocacy organization for people 50 and over. Their director of fraud prevention programs will give us some steps that we can take immediately that will not only keep our parents safer, but actually keep us safer too. First, let's hear more about May's situation. Her dad's first brush with this kind of criminal scam happened about 10 years ago when a pop-up window on his computer advised him to call this number.
He called that number and he let the remote into his computer. And thank goodness he did not have any passwords stored on the computer, because a year before that, I had told him never to store any passwords in his computer.
Since then, May and her brother have tried to keep an eye on her dad's behavior online, which isn't easy. They live far away from their parents, and that distance has made it difficult.
Then last year, he got a new computer. He had it for 3 days. A pop-up window came up from supposedly Microsoft saying something was wrong with the computer or his account. Call this number. And so he called that number. And this person, I'll call this person one, said, input this code into the computer. And some lights flickered and it looked like it did something. And so it starts to look legit.
May's mother entered the room and asked what was going on.
The person heard my mother talking, and the person said, who's that? And my dad said, my wife. And the person said, don't talk to her. So it seems like they were trying to isolate him and to control him with the social engineering. Right. And then they said that his bank account was hacked and that they needed to confirm his account. He gave the bank name, but not the account number, thank goodness. So they punted to person number 2, who is supposedly from that bank. And that person said that there's a lot of fraudulent activity on his bank account. Then that person punted to person 3, who was supposedly the county sheriff.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
So many people involved in this scam.
Oh, yes.
Person number 3, the one claiming to be from the sheriff's office, told May's dad that in order to prevent further hacking, he had to verify his bank account by making a purchase at a big home improvement store. You can see where this is going.
At this point, it has been 1 hour. He is still on the phone with them, driving to this home improvement store, and he's told to leave the phone in the car still on while he gets $4,000 worth of gift cards. So here, my father has some glimmer of skepticism, and he asked, why not buy a $5 gift card if I only needed to verify my account? And they explained it away somehow. I don't know exactly how. So he goes into this store and he tries to buy $4,000 worth of gift cards. His first credit card is declined 3 times, but then my dad pulls out a second credit card. And that credit card approves the transaction. So then he goes back out to the car, he reads out the card number, he scratches off the PIN, and he gives out the PIN. At that point, then he started feeling like something wasn't right, but he doesn't hang up.
Okay, so May's dad pressed the mute button and stuffed the phone into his pocket. He went back into the store to talk with the customer service people. They told him this was a scam, and hold on to your seats, they refunded the charges back to his credit card. Way to go, guys. Meanwhile, May's brother was in town for a visit and trying to reach their dad, and he was getting worried that his calls kept going to voicemail. He didn't know yet that his dad was being told to go to other stores to buy more gift cards. At this point, Dad told the scammers, "No, I want to go home." He was suspicious, but he didn't end the call.
He's still on the phone with him driving home, and he walks in the door still on the phone. And it's about 2 hours at this point. My brother is there, and he asks to put the person on speakerphone. This is still the county sheriff, supposedly. The county sheriff starts talking about what's happening with the bank account hacks. And my brother sees that the number that is showing is actually the same thing as the actual county sheriff's number. But then he thinks to ask for the person's full name spelled out. And then finally, at that point, the person finally hung up. They probably realized that they weren't going to get more out of our father. So start to finish, probably was about 2.5 hours that he spent under their spell or control of their social engineering. Immediately afterwards, my brother called the actual sheriff's office, and they confirmed the scam is happening and that they are able to spoof the number to make it look like they are calling from the actual sheriff's station.
This is so frustrating to listen to, right? To May's dad, I'm sure so many things seemed legit. The pop-up messages on a brand new computer, the flagging of fraudulent activity on a bank account, the very real-looking caller ID from local law enforcement. Sure, in hindsight, it might seem easy to see the red flags, but in the moment, it can be very difficult for anyone, young or old, no matter how tech-savvy you are, to avoid becoming the victim of a crime like this, especially when these scammers are pretending to be helpers, which drives me so crazy. So, how do we protect ourselves and protect our elders? Well, there is real help out there.
My name is Kathy Stokes, and I am the Director of Fraud Prevention Programs for AARP. I run a program called the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Writ large, we try to get to as many people as we can around the country with information on how to spot these potential scams and avoid them.
Kathy, I want to bring you in here because one of the things that seems so tricky is that we're telling our elders to beware of fraud, and then a lot of these tricksters are actually using that line, like they did with May's father, to trick them. So it gets so meta, right?
Yeah, it really does. And let me just state this very, very clearly. This is a crime. These are criminals who are preying on pretty much everybody that they can get a hold of, but specifically older adults because they believe that's where the wealth is. They are mostly organized crime, transnational organized crime. And May, I'm so glad that you used the term under their spell, because that's really kind of what's happening. And your dad, I'm so sorry, he experienced like 4 scams in one. And that's increasingly common, where it starts out as a pop-up on your computer, tech support, and you call the number. Of course you think you're talking to Microsoft because the pop-up said Microsoft. And then they get your bank on the line, and then they get law enforcement on the line. All of this is happening to the tune of billions of dollars being stolen every year.
So, according to a report from the Federal Trade Commission, consumers reported losing $10 billion in 2023. $10 billion. That is a huge number. But honestly, it's probably just a fraction of the real loss, because fraud is such an underreported crime. Now, among those who did report fraud, the average amount lost was $500. But for people in their 70s, that amount they lost was almost twice that. And for people in their 80s, it was nearly triple, for an average loss of $1,450. And I'm sure, like me, you've heard the real horror stories of elders who ended up losing tens of thousands of dollars to these criminals. It's honestly enough to make you feel kind of helpless, right? But as we'll hear, there are steps you can take today to help those you love avoid these kinds of crimes. And as it turns out, the first step is what we'll do in just a moment. Have a conversation. Stick around.
Your data is like gold to hackers. They're selling your passwords, bank details, and private messages. McAfee helps stop them. Secure VPN keeps your online activity private. AI-powered text scam detector spots phishing attempts instantly. And with award-winning antivirus, you get top-tier hacker protection. Plus, you'll get up to $2 million in identity theft coverage, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
If you've listened to the How To podcast for a while, then you know how important acceptance is when it comes to personal growth. And do you know who else is big on acceptance? Discover. You see, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. That's a whole lot of places and a whole lot of acceptance, which is great for Discover, but even better for you. Based on the 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/creditcard.
We're so done with New Year, New You. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
We're back. Our listener, May, has been telling us about her dad's experience with a fraud scheme that almost cost him several $1,000s. We're also talking with Kathy Stokes, who heads up AARP's fraud prevention programs.
Our program is half education, half supporting victims, and actually another third, because I like to go over 100%, is trying to do things sort of at a national level, changing the narrative on fraud victimization. And we do have a helpline. You can actually talk to a human about what happened or if you're not sure what to do. And that number is 877-908-3360. All of this is available to anyone. You don't have to be a member of AARP or of a certain age. And the other thing is you can sign up for these biweekly emails and texts called Watchdog Alerts. It's just an email. And you're going to take a quick look at it. This is what you need to know, and this is what you need to do. It gives you the nudge to talk to your mom and dad and say, hey, by the way, did you hear about this? I just got this in my email today.
Finding ways to start talking about cyber fraud is one of the best preventative measures you can possibly take. But that doesn't mean it's easy.
So my dad, he retired around 2000. This was not the era of cybersecurity training, how to be skeptical about emails and pop-up messages or how to tell if something is phishing, that sort of thing. We've tried to tell my parents things like, please call one of us immediately if anything remotely fishy has happened. Please hang up and call us directly, that sort of thing. We don't want to shame them or treat them like children, but we do need to make the point I love my father, but he can be somewhat easily frustrated and impulsive. So I have two core questions, really. The first is, how do I teach my dad better digital hygiene? And then the second question is, how do my brother and I help them from afar?
Well, just thank you for being so thoughtful as the daughter to your parents, for being concerned about this. We all really need to be concerned about this. And I think even before we get to better digital hygiene and how you can help them from afar, it's having a regular conversation, not about like, hey, mom, don't pick up the phone, or hey, dad, don't click that link, but have the conversation about the scams that are happening out there. Put it into a context so that it's more normalized to talk about, hey, this tech support scam is happening here at work. So what do you think about that? Like, having those conversations will help a lot, because we've learned through research that if you know about a specific scam, you are way less likely to engage with it because it will sound familiar and you just won't engage to begin with.
Kathy, it also sounds like you're saying, instead of coming at our parents with you, like you need to understand this, you need to do this in a different way, we might introduce the topic more generally.
Absolutely.
And is that about like not making people feel defensive? Because obviously one of the big themes here is that it makes our elders feel embarrassed. I mean, it makes any of us feel embarrassed when we get scammed, right? But in particular, our elders are being targeted, so their kind of shame and embarrassment needs to be defanged before we can have a real conversation about it.
Absolutely. And, at AARP, we don't even use the terminology get scammed. We say you are a crime victim, because that is exactly what they are. And we're trying to move the narrative away from something the individual who was targeted did or didn't know, or did or didn't do, and more like, this is a crime, these are criminals. There are things we can do to protect ourselves. And there's also ways to talk about it that helps to reduce that sense of shame and embarrassment. If you go to aarp.org/say this, you'll get a lot of really good information on that. And Courtney, you're absolutely right. It's about how we talk about it. We're so used to blaming people when this happens to them. We're so used to saying things like, why did you pick up the phone? Or I told you not to do this or that. And we don't mean what we're saying. We don't mean to blame them. It's just that we're used to reacting that way because we're afraid for them. We want to protect them, and we're mad at ourselves that it happened, maybe. So we just really have to rethink how we approach this conversation.
May, do you feel like you have tried that with your dad, having like a broader conversation?
No, we haven't. I think that my brother and I, we've tried to explain some technical things. We've done things to his computer. So it hasn't been a more general conversation about protecting oneself. It's been tied to these two main events that he's experienced.
We can't look at our older adults in our lives anymore as the problem. They're part of the solution. And part of the solution with that is bringing them into the conversation. And, let's stop trying to protect them about things that we haven't told them why we're trying, or we haven't put it into a context. Fraud is the number one crime in this country. We don't talk about it that way, but just in 2023, the last data available suggests that over $150 billion with a B were stolen from just Americans in 2023.
Wow.
$150 billion.
I guess the first piece of advice we're landing on is broaden the conversation, depersonalize it in the sense that your elder doesn't feel like they are the problem, but this profoundly widespread thing that's happening is the problem. And then, Kathy, moving beyond that sort of opening and de-shaming conversation, what should May and her brother be doing in particular to actually protect their dad?
We have to sort of reframe and go, okay, you know what? None of us, parents, kids, we cannot trust incoming communication right now. We can't trust an incoming phone call. We can't trust an email message or a text message or a message on social media. We have to be in that stance of not trusting. And that is anathema to sort of human existence. We trust. We think that, generally the world is a good place. So we have to sort of reframe and go, okay, you know what? They can get to us in all these different ways. So we need to not be responsive to the email and the text and the phone call. And we have to verify who's calling in a different way. So for example, let's say, May, that your dad gets a text from his bank, and it says it's from his bank, and it might even have like the 4 last digits of his account, trying to confirm whether or not he made a transaction. Instead of responding to that text, have dad go to his account statement and look up the phone number and just give them a call. Hey, are you trying to reach me? Is there a problem? And put the control into his hands, not into whoever's sending that message.
It's even scarier these days, I have to say, because a friend of mine said that scammers took her social media video postings and used AI to simulate her voice to call her father to scam him.
Oh, this is the new frontier, right, Kathy?
AI is definitely the new frontier. I can tell you these scams have been happening without AI for well over 2 decades. It is
really
not the voice that makes it real. It's the state that the criminal puts the target into. When you're in that heightened emotional state, when somebody says to you, granddad or grandma or mom or dad, it's me, I'm in so much trouble, I was in a DUI, I'm sitting in a jail cell, this lawyer says he can get me out, but I need $10,000 right away, can you help me, please help me? They're not thinking, is this me or is this Courtney? They're going, oh my God, I'm between my child or my grandchild and staying in jail overnight. You bet I'm going to do whatever I need to do. It's that heightened emotional state that keeps our brains in fight or flight. We got to do something. Our brains are set to that. If something comes in and it's a threat, our brain is the same as it was 300,000 years ago. Bypass logic. You have to deal with this now.
This is part of what's so confusing, right? Is that we have to fearmonger to get people to actually pay attention to this crime. But then do we contribute to them being in a heightened state? I mean, is there really a way to bypass that very primordial thing that happens in our brains, Kathy? Or are we contributing to people being even more freaked out and less logical about this?
I think the opposite is true. I think when we are able to tell people that the crimes work this way because it's how our brains are set up, it's how good the criminals are at using the latest technologies, it helps us understand what a big issue and a big problem is, and it puts power into our hands to say, okay, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to do everything I can to protect myself. I'm going to use all the tools at my disposal. And it's also the same rule, whether or not it's AI or whether it's someone in someone's basement making phone calls. We have to verify. One of the things that we're trying to work on is something we call the active pause. Most scams come at us with 3 things: contact out of the blue, puts you into that heightened emotional state, and contains urgency. So May, with your dad, the pop up on his screen, oh my God, there's something wrong with my computer, and oh my God, now they're going to take my money from my account and I have to act now. If we can train our brains that those 3 things are the trigger, then we can also train ourselves how to take what we're calling an active pause. It's not just stop, don't do anything, it's stop. Have I heard of this before? Is this something that makes sense to what's happening in my life right now? Active pause, it's taught in a lot of various disciplines. An emergency medical professional has to take that active pause instead of just jumping and running over to the person on the ground thinking it's a heart attack when it could be something entirely different. We've just got to take that step back and look at our internal inventory about what might be happening there that may not be right.
I'm also wondering about, this might sound kind of naive and silly, but like cues, like is it worth putting a sticky note on our parents' computers that say active pause, or somewhere like in the kitchen where they see things a lot? Because I just wonder if they might hold on to it better if they get a little flash of reminder.
I love that idea. And May, why don't you try it out and then come back to us and let us know if it works?
Yes, I will, because as I mentioned before, my father is easily frustrated and somewhat impulsive. And he admits it, that his temper can also be a little bit quick. And so maybe a sticky note might help him remember to take that pause, that sort of thing. It's a multi-tool solution.
It absolutely is.
Kathy, I'm curious about like gender, age, economic class. Are there certain people who are targeted more than others for these kinds of crimes?
In the big picture, it's really not about who we are as much as it is about how we are. What we've learned in our own research, and it's been substantiated elsewhere, is big life events, mostly what we would call negative shocks, the loss of a spouse, somebody, yourself or somebody that you love who's ill, having lost a job, those kind of things make us a lot more susceptible to fraud. And it may have to do with the ability of just how much you can deal with in your brain in one time, cognitive load. But we have seen that.
And I want to introduce one other thing from my own experience, which is that my dad has dementia. And, there's so many elders who are early stages of cognitive impairment who are probably the most vulnerable to this. Is that right, Kathy? And how do we help those elders?
I think that's a very special class of older adults. It's important to understand that cognitive decline does not have to be present for somebody to become a fraud victim. But for those who are in that state, we have to be that much more aware of what might be out there and do what we can to protect them. Sometimes it's about, putting on a robocall blocker on their phone. Like you have an operating system on your phone, right? And sometimes you get that notification that says that the operating system needs an update. Set that on auto, because quite often that's to close down a known vulnerability where criminals can access our information. So it's about keeping things updated and having the conversations.
You're probably noticing a theme here. Have the conversations. That's one of the biggest insights I'm taking away from Kathy. Those conversations can be hard, but there are a lot of entry points we can use to help us initiate them. Whether it's the fraud watch emails from AARP or, sending this episode to someone or, let's be real, listening to it side by side with your aging mom or dad, because I don't know if it's just my mom, but a lot of elders cannot figure out how to listen to a podcast on their own. Sorry, Mom. The point here is to find an excuse to talk about this stuff on a regular basis. That's half the battle. And then when you sit down to talk about the idea of an active pause. And talk about the 3 things Kathy said are hallmarks of most scams. First, contact out of the blue. The second one is something that puts you into a heightened emotional state. And the third is something that contains urgency. Now, coming up, we talk about what to do if you or an elder you love is the victim of a cybercrime. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Before we get back to the show, are you a Slate Plus member? If so, you'll get to hear the next episode of this really fun series we have going with one of our producers, Rosie. She is digging up the best advice from our How To archive and putting it to the test. Today's episode is on something that I think we universally need help with: sleep. If you're not a Slate Plus member, sign up by subscribing now on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of the How To show page, or visit slate.com/HowToPlus to get access wherever you listen. More now with Kathy Stokes from AARP's Fraud Watch Network and our listener, May, whose parents almost lost $4,000 in an elaborate elder fraud scheme. Her dad did recover the money through a refund from the big box store that issued the gift cards. But this kind of recovery isn't always possible. It's important to act fast.
If you realize it quickly enough, or the victim realizes it, and it involves a bank account, get in touch with the bank right away. There might be a way for them to stop pending transactions or pull the money back. It's rare, but it can happen.
May, did you guys report the scam that your father experienced?
I don't know. I would have to ask my brother on that. I don't know.
Because, Kathy, it's important that we report scams, and yet I have no idea, like maybe May doesn't. Where do we report them? And I'm sure some of this embarrassment and shame we've been talking about gets in the way of people often reporting them.
Yeah, the two big hurdles are I'm so embarrassed I don't want to tell anybody, and even if I did, who would I call? Depending on the resource, it will tell you, there's 17 different phone numbers you could call. My bottom line is call the police. You may get local law enforcement that, they don't really deal with scams and fraud, and they may even be of the mindset that, like, you gave away your money, so why are you calling them? Well, insist. You want to get a police report. And the reason for that is right now, if your dad had lost that $4,000, May, and it wasn't on credit cards, he would have been out that $4,000. With a police report, you have proof of what happened to you, how much was stolen and when, because down the road, we're going to be seeing lawmakers, whether at the state or federal level down the road, coming up with victim restitution funds. I gave you that number before, $150 billion. I mean, that is so much money leaving our economy. It's affecting individuals, but it's also affecting state governments and federal governments and social safety nets. So there's got to be a way down the road where people are going to somehow be able to seek restitution. And the best way to do that is to have the report. The best way to get law enforcement to pay more attention to this crime is to have a report. So I lean in on that a lot.
In other words, it takes a village. Listen, when you report fraud and insist on getting a police report, you're not just doing damage control for yourself, you're helping everyone. Law enforcement, other potential victims, all of us get a clearer picture of what's really going on. This would also be a good time to use a free resource like AARP's Fraud Watch Helpline to explore your options. Again, that number is 877-908-3360. We'll also include it in our show notes.
So let me just take a little side note here, which is that I myself am the victim of fraud. A few months ago, somebody took my information and started applying for credit under my name. Mm-hmm. They had my correct social security number. They had my correct date of birth associated with my name and address. And so I started receiving these letters saying that I was declined for credit on my application because thankfully I had frozen my credit years ago.
Oh, there you go.
Thank goodness I had done that. And so I did do that for my parents recently.
Oh, good.
After this.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Just to make sure that firewall was there for them.
I do want to lean in on the credit freeze. That is one of the most important things all of us can do. And basically it is reaching out to the three major credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. You can go to each of those and put together a credit freeze so that if somebody tries to open an account in your name, including yourself, you can't. The pain there is if you are actively looking to open a credit card account or buy a car and you have to unfreeze it. But it's increasingly easier to do that. And it's such an important sort of backstop. So because we have to assume that our data are out there now. And that's one of probably 5 things I would say you really need to make sure that you're doing.
Tell us the other 4.
I'll tell you the other 4.
Okay.
So we already talked a little bit about the operating system. When you get that prompt from your device that it's time to update the software, update it. You can even set it to happen automatically. And the same goes if you are on a PC and you have an antivirus malware package and it has an update, have that update automatically. They're constantly coming up with new patches, new fixes for things that are known vulnerabilities. Another thing is passwords. We are stuck with this horrible system where we're all needing to come up with strong and unique passwords for every single online account, financial or not. And someday this will go away and it'll be biometrics. But the best thing you can do right now is to adopt a password manager. And it is hard to teach somebody how to use one, but next time you're in town or your brother's in town, set one up for yourself and then show mom and dad how to use it, because once you have it set up, it's pretty easy.
We're talking about things like 1Password, for example. Okay.
Exactly. 1Password, Dashlane. There's a bunch of them. Basically, what you're doing is having a system create those passwords for you and save them so that all you have to know is the one password that gets into what I'll call the vault that has all the other passwords in it. And along with that is multi-factor authentication, where you have the opportunity to set it up so that when you're logging into an account, it will prompt you for an additional piece of information that it may send you by email or by phone or by text, or you may even have an app that generates that additional piece of information. That's just that extra layer of protection so that someone with your name and password doesn't also have that third piece of information. Anyone that has a social media account, there are things you can do to protect yourself. Look for the privacy settings, find out the ways that you're only sharing information with the people that are within your network of friends and loved ones. Don't accept friend requests from people you don't know. That is a big risk.
Let's review. Here are the key things to do as soon as you hear the closing credits of this podcast. First of all, freeze all that credit. Your parents' credit, your credit. And this is kind of weird, your kids' credit? You will have to unfreeze it down the line when you need it, but a little extra paperwork is better than losing a bunch of money to criminals. Trust us. The second thing is you got to keep your devices and your elders' devices up to date, including the operating systems they run on and the antivirus software that has been installed. Enable automatic updates moving forward so you don't even have to think about it. The companies that run these things are constantly building new firewalls as they figure out how the criminals are getting creative next. So let them do the work of protecting you. And third, set up a password manager and enable multi-factor authentication on all of the most important accounts. And finally, if anyone is playing around on social media, do some housekeeping on the privacy settings. Now listen, if you're a little daunted by this list, I get it. Truth be told, I've got some adulting of my own to do in this regard. This podcast episode has been a total wake-up call for me too. But we gotta just make a list and work through it. Kathy, I am feeling like an overwhelmed daughter. When I listen to you, I'm thinking like, oh gosh, there's like now a bunch of things in my mind that I need to do. For our listeners who are feeling a little overwhelmed, could you tell us here are the 3 things you must do tomorrow?
I would say maybe do the credit freeze. You can do it on their behalf. It takes a little bit of time. You have to remember usernames and passwords and things like that. They will ask you for your social security number. Unfortunately, there's no way around that. But if you're contacting them, it's very different than someone saying they're Equifax and they need your information. So do the credit freeze. And the other thing you can do is mom and dad probably get a lot of snail mail still. Make sure that they're bringing it in regularly, because we do see people stealing mail still, and have them shred information so that, before they throw it away or put it in the recycling bin, somebody can't access it and try to open an account in their name or something like that. If your mom or dad are active travelers, or they like to go to the coffee shop and, scroll on their phone, look into virtual private network. It's a VPN that helps them if they're on Wi-Fi and they're on a public Wi-Fi. It protects them from any intrusions of anyone trying to exploit that particular public Wi-Fi. I think those are really good ideas. But I think in the end, the most important thing, begin the conversation. Normalize the conversation. Help them understand this isn't just about them because they're older. It's about all of us. And there are things we can do to protect ourselves, and it begins with knowing what's going on.
Wow. Okay. We've learned so much. I'm so grateful. May, any last questions?
No, thank you so much, both of you. This has been really helpful.
Thank you. I feel like, with all of us working together to look up and down our generational line and point out the ways in which this is collective. And to your point, Kathy, there really are things we can do both individually and collectively to fight it. It makes me feel a little more hopeful. I'm running to freeze my credit right now as soon as we hang up. Thank you both so much.
Everybody else too. Get out there and freeze your credit.
Shredders, VPNs, multi-factor authentication. Okay, we just threw a lot at you. But remember, we're in this together. We got this. Check out AARP's Fraud Watch Network online at aarp.org. You'll find lots of helpful information, newsletters, and more. Thanks to Kathy Stokes and to May for joining us. Be safe out there on those interwebs, you guys, and beware the pop-ups. That's all for this episode, but don't forget to join us on today's Slate Plus Quick Fix. Our producer Rosie is going to test a bunch of sleep hacks. Again, you can subscribe now on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of the How To Show page, or visit slate.com/how-to+ to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available for you to listen to right now. We'll see you there. Do you need to start a sensitive conversation with someone you love? Send us a note at howto@slate.com or leave us a voicemail at 646-495-4001, and we might have you on the show. And if you like what you heard today, please give us a rating and a review and tell a friend. That helps us help more people. How To is produced by Rosemary Belson with Kevin Bendis. Joel Meyer is our supervising producer. Merritt Jacob is senior technical director and composed our theme music. Charles Duhigg created the show. Carvel Wallace is my co-host. I'm Courtney Martin. Thanks for listening.